I remember exactly the day my sister looked at my parents and said firmly that she wanted to inherit the family business, that she wanted to be a powerful woman, that she was ready to take the business to another level, as if the world were there, at her feet. At that moment, I just smiled. No one knew. But I had been reborn. I had returned to that exact point in time when our lives would be completely divided. In her previous life, she chose to marry Nathan, the heir to the Linwood family, a reserved, tradition-bound man who rarely appeared in public but possessed an absurd fortune and a silent power that dominated influential circles. She believed she was winning by becoming the wife of someone so prestigious, but her obsession with status led her to an empty and lonely life. She spent her days locked in a cold mansion, with no company, with a husband who barely spoke a word. And, at the height of her frustration, she became involved with the butler. When the affair was discovered, Nathan kicked her out without hesitation, as if she were a dirty object. Meanwhile, I inherited the company and became one of the most recognized businesswomen in the country. I turned a failing business into an empire. But I paid a high price. I worked until I collapsed, made deals with despicable people, swallowed insults, lost my health, and in the end, my sister pushed me off a building to erase my existence. And then, I woke up again at that crucial moment. She chose to inherit the company. I chose to marry Nathan. How ironic. She inherited billions in debt and a time bomb about to explode. I gained a loveless marriage to an absent man. But with time, money, and freedom to do whatever I wanted. This time, I would live smart. I would let her sink on her own. When she stood in front of my parents and said she had studied, that she was a financial expert, and that she was ready to take over, I just nodded in agreement. The excitement in her eyes was almost comical. She had no idea that the company was completely bankrupt. The banks had cut off credit. The employees hadn't been paid in 2 months, and the brand's reputation was destroyed. In my past life, I fought like a woman possessed to save it, almost dying in the process. Now it was her turn. My parents hesitated, trying to convince her to marry Nathan, saying he was pure, disciplined, that he wouldn't cause any trouble, that life with him would be stable. But she refused. She was obsessed with being called CEO. I laughed inside. The first thing she did after taking over the company was to post photos of ownership documents and meetings with shareholders on her social media. She called herself President Aurora, as if she were about to lead a revolution. She called me to brag, saying she had achieved something great, that she was respected, that she was finally sitting at the big table. And I, keeping up my act, congratulated her in an almost sarcastic tone, wishing her happiness would last. But I knew it wouldn't. Meanwhile, I was getting ready for my wedding to Nathan when I saw him up close for the first time. Wearing a dark tunic and maintaining that indifferent, mysterious look, I understood why my sister had fallen in love with him in a past life. He was absurdly handsome, unattainable, and impersonal. He spoke to me without emotion, saying that I could plan the wedding however I wanted, that the budget was unlimited. I just smiled and said there was no need for anything grand, that I preferred something simple, and suggested that the money be used for charity. It was true. I always liked to help, even in the midst of chaos. And, to my surprise, Nathan seemed to look at me differently. Maybe because I was different from the others. Maybe because I didn't beg for his attention. The wedding dinner was organized by him in a secluded mansion, with an award-winning chef and white flowers. Everywhere, it was elegant and discreet. My friends were impressed. Many came up to tell me how lucky I was, but my sister showed up, poisonous as ever, saying that it didn't even look like a real ceremony, that it was obvious Nathan didn't love me, that I was doomed to live as a widow. I smiled and said I preferred that to living in debt and alone. My parents started borrowing money to save the company. Creditors were knocking on the door. My sister was freaking out at meetings. When she found out the company was on the verge of bankruptcy, She accused me of plotting it all. She pretended to be outraged and told me to ask Nathan for a $50 million investment. She said it was urgent. I pretended I couldn't even see him, that he had frozen my cards, that we barely had any contact. She believed me. She laughed at my situation, believing she had won. Little did she know that I was already drawing up my own plans with the silent support of Nathan, who began to observe me more closely. I asked him to let me work for 3 months as his personal assistant. I wanted to learn, and to my surprise, he accepted. During that time, I learned more than I ever had in any course. I traveled with him, participated in complex negotiations, and saw how the real business elite worked. At the end of the 3 months, I resigned with gratitude. He looked at me and asked what my plan was. I told him I wanted to start a clothing brand that valued local culture with modern touches, something high-end. He wrote me a check for $5 million and said it was an investment, not a gift. My heart raced. I knew he trusted me. My sister's company, on the other hand, was a mess. She fought with potential investors, was arrogant, unprepared, threw wine at partners during meetings, and still portrayed herself as an empowered woman on social media. Her parents still protected her. But the net was closing in. Rumors started to spread. That's when the butler, Travis, reappeared. In a past life, he had been her great secret love, and now he was back, all charming, pretending he wanted to get back together. Instead of pushing him away, I used him. I had him deliver a document to a client famous for his parties and vices. My sister was there. Travis saw her again. In less than a week, he was wearing expensive clothes, driving a luxury car, and announcing that he was opening a bar. Obviously, she was financing him, and so the downward spiral began. She supported him. He cheated on her. She turned a blind eye. He used her in sordid meetings, until someone took compromising photos of the two of them at an orgy with foreign businessmen. The images ended up in the hands of a rival, who displayed them publicly during the company's annual party. It was a scandal. Her image was ruined. Her contracts were canceled, and investors fled. The company, which had barely been reborn, went bankrupt. Travis, like the scoundrel he was, tried to run away with the rest of the money, but he was intercepted at the airport. My sister tried to get the money back from him, but he beat her up. She was left paraplegic. My parents, desperate, sold everything to pay off the debts. They put my sister in a nursing home. I went to visit her. She looked at me with hatred. She said I was worse than her, that I was living like a widow with a man who didn't love me. I just showed her the engagement ring, the same one Nathan had bought for over $30 million at an auction. I showed her the jade bracelet that symbolized the official wife of the Linwood family. I told her she could call me President or Mrs. Linwood, that I had achieved everything on my own. And then she screamed. She asked if I had also been reborn. I confirmed it. I told her that on the day she chose the company, I had smiled not out of naivety, but because I already knew everything. I told her that Travis had been deliberately put in her path, that everything had been meticulously planned by me. She freaked out. She screamed that I would go to hell. I just wished her a long life so she could contemplate her defeat every day. I left the nursing home and got into the car where Nathan was waiting for me with a slight smile. I told her I had bought some land on the coast for myself because I had mentioned that I liked listening to the sea. 2 years later, my company was listed on the stock exchange. I became a billionaire. I asked a nurse to read to my sister every week the magazines and newspapers where I appeared. When she saw the photo of Nathan smiling at me, she died of rage, literally. Travis, he got out of jail, became a second-rate influencer, and was killed by 3 women who drugged him. It made the news. I, on the other hand, continued to live in peace, not because of luck, but because I chose wisely. I wasn't guided by anger, but by strategy, because this time, my victory would be silent, profound, and irreversible, and it was.